Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
So hello and welcome to the Healers Café. Today I have with me John E. Lewis. He's a PhD, is a past full-time and current voluntary associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. And he is the founder and president of Dr. Lewis Nutrition. So there's so much to discuss with you. And welcome, and thanks for saying yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
All right. So these are just conversations. So we're going to start with that.
Sure.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Psychiatry, nutrition. I'm going to ask you very personally, what got you from the beginning even interested in this field of medicine? And they seem to be a little bit different one from the other.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I have a fairly good answer for you. I don't know if everybody will appreciate it, but I was a graduate student at the University of Miami. I needed a full-time job because a job over the summer because my assistantship didn't cover the summer semester. And I was hired by a psychologist at the medical school at the University of Miami to do grunt work for him for, data analysis, data entry, just, again, general grunt work in the office. And that's how I got connected to the Department of Psychiatry. So I'm not a mental health specialist, I'm a physiologist, but I grew from there. I created a little niche for myself in the department, running clinical trials on nutrition, dietary supplements, and exercise training. And the university doesn't have any kind of nutrition center or department. I'm no longer full-time, as you mentioned, but there are, a handful of people doing nutrition-related research at the university. But while I was there, I developed a pretty good lab running these clinical trials, primarily on polysaccharides, that I hope we'll talk just a little bit about at some point. But 5 years ago, I ended up leaving full-time. I just got really burned out on begging the government and foundations for money to do research and nickeling and diming my life. And submitting all these grants is a very low to no gratification way to make a living and to live a life. But at the same time, I had published some really cool findings in my clinical trials that spurred me to leave academics full time and start my company. And so here I am today, still trying to build a business to a level that I would be happy with, related to a lot of this research that I conducted on these crucial polysaccharides that people are not getting in the diet today.
Wow. Okay. That's quite there's several aspects to this. Yes. And we should talk about the polysaccharides. So don't worry, we'll get there. But I think, your comment about, you discover something in clinical research and it's so difficult when it's natural, when it's easy to do. When it's reproducible, when you can't likely have patents on it, to actually get research. And then the people we're dealing with are making salaries of, whatever, 300, 400,000 a year.
It's disgusting. I mean, that was, you're singing to the chorus, as we say. I got so tired of just, again, scrimping by on these mediocre budgets that if I was lucky enough to get a grant, I'm still having to get a bunch of work study students or residents or fellows who are not getting paid, but they need some research experience. So I ended up becoming a magnet for all of these, students all the way to postdoctoral fellows who needed some kind of research experience to take the next step in their life. And they happen to have some interest in nutrition or exercise. And so I got an army of people that I had helping me at that time, which I was very grateful for. But then meanwhile, like you said, I look around the university and I see just so many bureaucratic people. So all these people sitting in these bureaucratic positions, making these incredible six-figure salaries. And then meanwhile, I'm not even making, half of what they're making, let alone close to their salary. And it's just so discouraging when you're a clinical researcher, in the grind or in the trenches doing all this work. And then meanwhile, you have a bunch of paper pushers making these enormous salaries. And it was very, very discouraging for me after a while. And then, forget about it, to your other point related to, the kind of work I'm doing in the natural sciences, nutrition, dietary supplements. And then I'm trying to, get into that NIH clique or the Alzheimer's Association clique or the American Heart Association, one of these big foundations. And if you're not doing stuff related to pharma or genetics, man, you've got to really have like some significant connection to even be able to just sniff their money, let alone get it for research.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it seems to be more and more. Like I used to have a little bit of faith in, in the NIH or, departments like that, but certainly in the last couple of years, with all the studies they've had to take out because the conclusions weren't even consistent with the data, or the data was not done right. And all of these things got published in, amazing journals.
Right.
And it turns out that, it looks like politics and money and pharma is the head of everything. That is the science, it's the science of making
That's
money in
Exactly.
spite of people's health, or to
Well,
some against people's health, it's like,
exactly. And you
yeah,
think about all these politicians and bureaucrats that say, trust the science. What the heck does that even mean? Science is to be tested, not trusted. You develop a hypothesis and then you test it. You don't trust it, you test it.
I know. No, it's anyway, we in Canada here, where I'm calling from, we're in the process of having the government needing to show us the science, whether it was for the flying mandates or for all kinds of, excuses that they had. And there is nothing. Like, they cannot come up with anything. It's actually shocking, and as we're seeing, things are, anyway, I don't want to be a discussion about this, but just saying, it really, it's very hard because people are now brainwashed to think, trust the science, when it's like, trust and science shouldn't be in the same sentence.
That's right, exactly.
And and then if you have something that sounds like it works, it's been tried with people that is safe, let's say first, and digestible, and it's not some new genetic modifying technique,
right.
and we see clinical results and all that, and then you want to actually do a study on that, it's near impossible. And yet now people are programmed to say, where's the science? It's like, come on, it's so crazy. Anyway, that's enough. Let's get to real content. So tell us a little bit about all of the polysaccharide, your research, what I think your link with immunology is super important, especially today, because the immune system of people are being deeply challenged.
Absolutely.
So you take over now.
Thank you. Well, prior to whatever you want to call all this, for the last 2 years, there was, at least in the United States, and I think in Canada too, a big emphasis on brain health. I mean, we've had just an explosion in the last, several decades of people with either Alzheimer's, MS, Parkinson's, obviously the three big neurodegenerative disorders, but then you have all these other things related to it, anything from children with ADHD to, athletes or military or veterans with TBI or other types of brain injuries. Even this notion of, I'm a high functioning achiever and I want to be focused all the time, right? So you got literally the whole spectrum of society from youth to cradle to grave, basically, where there's some issue related to brain health. I was even writing a blog today about mental health and depression, major depressive disorder being the second leading cause of disability today, just behind cardiovascular disease. But I got started in this line of polysaccharide research almost 20 years ago due to a patient here at our cancer center at the University of Miami and a pathologist who completely switched his life from running a pathology lab to practicing nutrition. But when I met both of those two, they rapidly started educating me about their own lives and their own journeys and how these polysaccharides are so amazing. And I mean, I could tell you in grad school, I probably had one lecture in biochemistry about polysaccharides that could, you know, you could have done in 10 minutes and didn't know anything other than, well, polysaccharides are for a fuel source for our cells, and that was about it. But what ended up transpiring for me is, you know, coming from somebody that already had an interest in nutrition and supplements, it totally shifted my career into this path down the polysaccharide road. And what I ended up doing was running, again, several clinical trials. I think the two most significant ones related to Alzheimer's disease, again, from a conventional medical perspective, what can be done for people with dementia or Alzheimer's? Virtually nothing. I mean, if you take one of the 5 FDA approved drugs for dementia, you're lucky if it delays decline for a few months. And then after that, you just kind of keep falling off the cliff to death. So when you look at it from the perspective of not only the person being afflicted with the disease, but then the primary caregiver who is also completely stressed out and health compromised, and then the other ancillary family members and, you know, people that help care for that person, it's an incredibly costly disease. It's costing the United States about $500 billion per year. And that's only with 6 million people with Alzheimer's and another 7 or 8 million people with other forms of dementia. So we're talking, you know, 14 million out of a 330 million population that's costing us 500 billion per year in direct and indirect medical costs. I mean, that's crazy. So we ran this clinical on people with moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease. And again, these are people that Big Pharma cares nothing about because they want to study either mild cognitive impairment or people that are, you know, newly diagnosed with a very mild form of dementia. They're not interested in really sick people. So we ran this trial for 12 months. We looked at assessments at baseline, 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. We did the neuropsych testing at each of those time points. We drew blood at baseline and 12 months. And what we discovered was really nothing quite short of astounding. We showed at 9 and 12 months, clinically and statistically significant improvements in cognitive function. Now that we published 3 papers from that trial. That first one was published in 13. It's hard to believe that's been 9 years ago. But I've not seen, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm, you know, an egomaniac here, but I've not seen any other study or any other article showing that kind of improvement in people with such a severe disease. The other things we showed, for example, were improvements in TNF-alpha and VEGF. As you know, these are 2 markers classically looked at in heart disease and cancer. Our paper is probably one of the first ones showing a reduction in both of those markers in people with Alzheimer's. We also showed a really nice improvement in CD4 to CD8 ratio over that 1-year period, which is, you know, a very important marker, excuse me, for overall immune function. And as we age, regardless of, you know, if you have dementia or anything else, you want to keep that CD4 to CD8 ratio as high as possible. And then the other really fascinating thing we showed in our study was an improvement of just under 300% of CD14 cells, which are a marker of adult stem cells. So when you put all those things together, yes.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
Wow.
So when you put all those things together, when you have the improvement on the clinical side of the cognitive function, combined with lowering inflammation, combined with modulating the immune system, and turning on the adult stem cell making process. And by the way, I didn't mention the average age of these folks was 79.9 years. And they had dementia for at least on average 3 years and a minimum of 1 year. So these were really, really sick people. So when you give the body these concentrated polysaccharides that are very, very uncommon, if not completely out of the modern diet, you're essentially giving the cells the things that they need to function properly. There are way many smarter people than me that are, into biochemistry and physiology, looking at how these polysaccharides affect cellular function. But unfortunately, we just don't get that many of them in the modern diet today. So when you take them in a concentrated product like what I'm now selling based on some of this research, you get an amazing boost to your cells. So it's kind of like if you have a car, I use this very poor analogy because I can't think of a better one, but if your car has water in the gas tank and it's kind of sputtering along, it still runs, but it's sputtering, it doesn't really, drive that well. You get that water cleared out and then you give it high test 93 grade gasoline, and now boom, suddenly your car is running like it's brand new again. That's exactly what giving these polysaccharides does to our cells. It's just amazing. They're so dynamic in terms of the coded information that they have to instruct our genes what to do to function properly. And it's really the bioengineering of life.
Clearly passionate about this, but I mean, it's a huge discovery, which obviously is being entirely neglected.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is the problem. Yeah, well, welcome to the natural world. So,
exactly.
But and I appreciate that sometimes in supplement form, it's the best way to take it. One, because it's more concentrated, you can have exactly what you want, and these things may not be available easily and not in every country or place. But without trespassing on any proprietary rights or anything like that, but
sure.
what is in it? What are these things that, because there's some of our listeners might be keen, one, to find out more, and so we will have a link directly to you. But what are can you explain a little bit more what people could do who are now growing their own food, taking care of themselves a little bit more that way? Is there anything that you could recommend at this moment?
Absolutely. So first of all, this product, Daily Brain Care, that arose out of all of this research, not just the Alzheimer's study, but the other trials as well. There are two key ingredients to consider when you're thinking about polysaccharides. One is aloe vera, and the other one is rice bran. So with aloe vera, of course, as you know, humans have been using aloe vera for thousands of years. But if you talk to the typical person on the street, he or she would think, well, aloe vera is great for if you have a sunburn or a cut or a wound, something topical. But I can assure you, when you take out all of that water out of the gel, it's about 98.5, 99% water. You strip all of that water out. Now you're left mostly with polysaccharide. There could be some other phytonutrients in there as well, but the one that I use is completely pure ACE mannan, or the aloe polysaccharide. Now you have the dynamic nutrient, the phytonutrient that you need to give to your cells. And then the rice bran, again, rice bran is not that common either, especially for people who eat white rice in preference to brown rice. Once you strip the bran off, man, you've really taken out all of Mother Nature's goodies in the rice, because now you're just basically left with a simple carbohydrate, which, can be okay, but you really want to have that rice bran, because that capsule is what contains all those different polysaccharides and other phytonutrients. So the combination of those two things, plus several other things that I have in there as well, things like N-acetylcysteine, tart cherry powder, flaxseed. I have a very special type of clay. It's a bentonite clay that's actually been patented to be able to chelate out heavy metals and toxins and other things that it binds to, and then just beautifully carries all that stuff out in our waste. All these things together create just a really biodynamic formula. And so what I would tell people, and this is my own bias, as you know now from us meeting, is I've been eating a predominantly whole food, plant-based diet for the last 25 years. So I would tell our listeners that even if you can't take a product like mine, if you're somewhere else in another part of the world and you just don't have access, you could still try to eat as many things as you can as they look at in nature. So, I mean, unless you're blending something in a smoothie, that's certainly one thing, but, try to eat things with as little processing as possible, whether, again, it's rice or apples, potatoes. I mean, there are so many different things that are good for us that have so much nutrition. But if you're eating, potato chips instead of a whole baked potato, well, guess what? You're going down the wrong path there. So
Manon Bolliger here, and I want to thank you for taking actionable steps towards engaging your healing journey and helping others discover their path by watching, sharing, subscribing, and reviewing these podcasts. Every review and share helps spread the word, these different perspectives and choices and options for healing. And to thank you, I'd like to invite you to sign up to my free 7-sequence email tips on health and healing for everyday life. You can go to healerscafe.com tips. Thanks so much.
Again, I like to tell people, just in terms of general nutritional advice, to eat things the way they look as much as possible in nature, and then try to eat them with as little processing as possible.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. As we're talking, there's a couple questions I have actually about this, and because of our current situation, if it does help with Alzheimer's, and we know now, it looks like anyways, that it seems like an acceleration in people of a whole bunch of conditions and diseases outside of the brand new one, which is whatever, the sudden adult death syndrome. But other people are getting more likely to get cancer, or getting reoccurrence of cancers, or rheumatoid arthritis, or any of the autoimmune diseases, or MS. It seems like, people with their sight problems, and so many things are coming so much faster now. It's almost like it has accelerated that. And of course, these things were, not the Pfizer documents, they never actually officially tested it on pregnant women, though there are reports now that there were, I think, 28 out of the 29 women who did develop pregnancies ended up with miscarriages. Right. So all this information has come out. Where do you, this is a very long question, I'm sorry, but a lot of people want to detox, right? They're saying, how do we detox? And when I still had my license as a naturopath, we would always say, well, pregnancy is a time you cannot detox, because it's going to go to your fetus. And I've always had this question in the back of my mind is, yes, and like bentonite clay and other things like that you're mentioning, it's foods. Will the body do something negative to itself? Like when you give the body everything it needs and the mother's health, let's say, improves, is nature created that the fetus would get the negative effects, or would the fetus improve? Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I think that's an outstanding question. And most of the work that I did, in fact, no, let me rephrase that. All the work that I did, we always excluded women who were pregnant or attempting to get pregnant, just for the very, ethical considerations of that state. So we never really wanted to go down that road, my colleagues and I. But what I will tell you is, we have almost a 2.5-year-old, and she was born with my wife taking our formula daily. And when we started giving her solid food at 6 months, we started introducing, or I did, this is really, my wife's an optometrist, so this is a whole different field for her. But I started giving our daughter, the polysaccharides at 6 months when we first started introducing her to solid food. And I can tell you that the child, again, without sounding like an egomaniac, is just amazing. I mean, this girl, she just comprehends so much. Her language skills are amazing. Every time a foreign, a stranger meets her, they think she's like 4 or 5 based on her language skills. And so I've had other reports of women who were having difficulty getting pregnant, taking the polysaccharides, and then boom, getting pregnant. My wife had a very healthy pregnancy. She did have a C-section because Angie grew to be like, she was at, I think, 39 weeks. She was already 22 inches long and like 9 pounds. So he was a big baby. And so Leonette decided to have her, through a C-section rather than naturally. But I think what happens with these polysaccharides in particular is that, again, it's kind of going back to what I mentioned a little while ago. It's giving the body the raw materials to function properly. So through our own innate intelligence, our body knows what to do with these things. It knows where to send these polysaccharides and vitamins and minerals and all these other cofactors and elements that we get. And so I don't feel like our body is incapable of saying, okay, this bentonite clay is here now. Let me attach this arsenic to it so it will be, excreted out the system as opposed to being deposited into an evolving or growing fetus. I really feel like our bodies are just so intelligent inherently that it knows how to do that.
Yeah, well, that's my supposition,
Right.
because I certainly haven't seen any studies for the same ethical reasons that until more recently, you just don't do studies, or you don't say safe for pregnancy when there's actually no studies to say that
That's
it
right.
is. That kind of insanity, as far as, I mean, it's criminal, but
Exactly.
but I do find that there must be a difference because our body is innately intelligent. So,
That's right.
if it does take things out of the mother, and like you gave the example, if they're taking it before pregnancy, they get pregnant. Well, I'd be wondering whether I should stop that supplement.
Absolutely.
It's like, it doesn't quite make sense, Yeah, and then you can look at all things, Yeah, so it's anyway. That's why I wanted to ask your opinion, because I don't think I've actually ever asked out loud that question.
But I think related to all of that, what again, this particular formula that has been in, evolution, if you will, over actually before I started, Dr. McDaniel was the one again who really introduced me to all this, and then he and I have worked together for all these years. But related to what we're going through as a society, as a species today, I think for anyone who's concerned about, after taking one or more of these injections, and now what's going on if you feel compromised, if you're feeling like you have this long COVID syndrome that I think gets thrown around too much. I don't think it's really bad. I think it's actually something else. But the key to me, the bottom line to this is you have to modulate the immune system as much as you can, meaning we need to optimize its functioning as much as possible. And I have yet to see, maybe you could argue vitamin D, maybe you could argue curcumin, and I'm probably coming off as very biased here, but I have really seen so much amazing research published, not just from our lab, but from others, showing how these polysaccharides are so incredibly immunomodulatory and beneficial for the immune system. I find it hard to put anything else above how these polysaccharides affect the immune system. Again, I guess you could make an argument for vitamin D or curcumin. Obviously, both of those have a lot of research behind them and how immunomodulatory they are. But man, pound for pound, or ounce for ounce, or milligram for milligram, these polysaccharides in my world are just so important and so crucial to keeping our immune system functional. And as we know, as immunology has progressed over the last several decades, we know that the immune system interacts with all of our other major organ systems to really kind of, survey what's going on and modulate and regulate inflammation and all these cytokines and growth factors. And so if our immune system is crapping out on us, then that just involves every other major organ system. And then what's happened, your overall health is compromised.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So have you had, or are you in a position to, I know research wise it's impossible, so I'm not asking from that level, but Are there people reaching out, or do you have access to people who are asking for solutions to help their immune systems, where you could give them this to test that out?
Absolutely, all the time. I mean, I think, even though my product is called Daily Brain Care, I tell people that's really for a marketing purpose based on the claims that I'm utilizing on the label, on the brochure, on the website, because of all the science that I have that supports those claims. But in reality, I could have called this product, virtually anything: daily heart care, immune care,
Yeah.
stomach care, bone care, you name it. I could focus on any major organ system. But in reality, most people today, as what you were alluding to, whether it's due to taking some of these injections, getting viruses or other infections, people have immune issues or immune challenges that they need help. And so, I mean, again, I may sound biased, but I feel like Daily Brain Care is one of your go-to solutions for helping to improve immune function.
Yeah. Well, maybe, yeah, we'll connect to, because I'm connected to people that might be able to have you talk on networks where the focus is actually to help a lot of these people.
Great.
Because yeah, we just, it's not going to come from another drug solution, right? It's
No, definitely not.
it really has to come. And I think people that are seeing what has happened are becoming more aware. That's the good news, and I also, I think there is a lot of hope, because the other thing too, a lot of the unbelievably well-meaning and whistleblowers that have spoken out, but who have pure medical training, are not educated to understand the healing capacity of the body. So,
right, exactly.
So often their statements are so dire. Like, if I listen to, I'm not going to name any names, but I feel like, oh my God, do we really need to lose hope? Is like, can people actually recover from this, and even people who don't have symptoms, but it's still, a factory within producing things that are, as some people say, ticking time bombs. I don't like that word, but the thing is, if you hear that there's no medical solution from people who acknowledge that there's a problem, it leaves people in a really dark place. And so I really think that this is the time for all these natural ways to come out and give hope, because people need to see that they're not alone. There are things that work, and and there are solutions, even though we can't get grants or all of that.
Absolutely. Along those lines, I have a very good friend who took 2 of the messenger RNA injections, and then he developed, and I don't remember, I'd have to ask him exactly. It was not like immediate, but within several months, he ended up developing cardiomyopathy to the point where he actually spent 3 days in the ICU at the hospital. He thought he had had a heart attack, and they catheterized him and everything. I mean, he literally thought he was dying. And then, he got out of the hospital. He contacted me. He told me what happened. And I said, look, you really should be taking these polysaccharides. I mean, he had done it on and off for several years, but never really got very consistent with it. Not because he didn't believe in what I was doing. It was just kind of like, for him, he never really associated the true value of it. But I got him to take it. I got him on a very high dose. And this was after seeing, multiple cardiologists trying to get more information about what the infection in his heart was doing, or, what it meant to him. I mean, he couldn't even work out anymore. He was so weak and so out of breath, he couldn't do anything. But I got him on a very, very big dose of the polysaccharides. And now here we are several months later, he's feeling much better. Is he totally out of the woods? I don't know that, but at least he's, functional again, exercising again, and feeling like he can, actually walk across his house with not being short of breath and feeling like he needs to go lie down. So there are definitely solutions, but like you're alluding to, we have such an inertia against nutrition and supplements with this, gigantic pharma thing that just hovers over all of us. And then, even what's really sad to me is you have all the people who are really highly educated in the medical world who, unless they've gone out of their way, like you're a naturopath, so you're obviously a different professional, but for like the medically conventionally trained people, unless they go out of their way to learn more about nutrition, they just look at things through the world of drugs. They don't even think of nutrition as being a solution. So imagine those are the really educated people. Now imagine the guy just walking down the street who has a high school education and wouldn't know anything about nutrition if he wasn't reading it from maybe a magazine or his favorite website. So wow, like we have such incredible, enormous resistance to the message that I'm trying to promote to people, and I'm sure you have in your career as well. It's sometimes I just feel like it's overwhelming to even try to resist this, but I just know the work that I've done, I've got good science. I help people with my products, and I'm going to continue doing this till my last breath. I mean, that's my goal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that sounds really good. And I've got to admit that I was not as aware as I am now about the role of polysaccharides. I know they're important, but it's like, oh, there's so many things important, right? And so I'm gonna go dig in a little deeper here. And what is the website? We're gonna put the link, obviously, and publish, but and I'm on Rumble, and I'm still on YouTube. Strangely.
Okay, great. It's simply drlewisnutrition.com, and there's no period after the dr. It's Dr. Lewis, Lewis, nutrition.com.
Okay, and people could find that product. The name
Daily Brain Care.
Okay.
Daily Brain Care. Yes, it's the product's there. My email address is there. My phone number's there. Anybody can contact me. I'm happy. I mean, I don't really do a lot of one-on-one consultation or coaching with people, but if people are interested in that, I do that occasionally. But I'm really focused on, distributing my product and hopefully at some point in the future, if I have more funding, do more research. That's not really my focus now, but there's so much to be done, particularly in things like Alzheimer's. And I didn't even talk about the multiple sclerosis study, but I can share with you the articles that
I would love that, actually, because I'm in what I'm setting up here. I'm reaching out also to people who are either contributors, inventors, or have had a clinical experience, because I am making a real point of not practicing medicine. So I'm now a coordinator and facilitator. I'd love to find out more, and also put you in touch with already existing things. I mean, I don't think we have to worry about but there's enough people in need. I think we can help people no matter what.
That's right.
Anyway,
I would be happy to support you any way you would like educationally. If you'd like to, continue working together. I lecture, totally CME, CEU approved. I can be completely non-promotional with, my company or my product. I can just do strictly educational lectures, no problem. If you're interested in anything like that, I'm happy to.
Okay, well, we'll be in touch. Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.